Hi, I'm Ollie. Welcome to Possibility Space. Today I'm going to read you, maybe decide what defence is for before you fund it? Despite promising not to make new major policy or spending commitments on his way out, Keir Starmer has saddled Andy Burnham with a decade of rising defence spending. A pledge to raise spending to 2.6% of GDP by 2027, an ambition to reach 3% in the next parliament, and a target to reach 3.5% by the one after that. A capable leader would balk at having the next decade of policy dictated to him. A serious thinker would treat this eye-watering invoice as an invitation to reassess. An attentive reader might note that the review underpinning the plan was led by Lord Robertson, who spent 2 decades as an arm industry lobbyist, and treat the plan with appropriate suspicion. But Burnham, keen to secure elite support, is simply letting Starmer tell him what to do. The only question left is how to pay for it. Because Burnham's Manchesterism has nothing to say on foreign policy, he's allowing Labour's right-wingers to answer that for him as well. Al Cairns and Wes Streeting would cut welfare to fund warfare. Starmer is already gutting the infrastructure that the country needs and demanding savings from every single department. Unwilling to be outflanked on the right, Burnham is now pushing the same cuts. Public investment, welfare, infrastructure, foreign aid, everything is on the chopping block, but the military itself. Much of the left is no more serious. Their instinct is to hear defence spending and simply reply no. The reflex is understandable. Britain's record abroad hardly inspires trust. Last year, while facilitating genocide in Palestine, British military equipment turned up in the hands of a Sudanese militia committing another genocide. But refusing to engage with the topic hands the question of what the country owes to its people to the flag shaggers. We can curtail the blood-curdling excesses of Britain's expeditionary armed forces. We can fully fund honest-to-God defence, and we can make enormous savings. Here's how. First, we should make clear what few in Westminster are willing to admit. We already spend badly. $5.5 billion on a decade-late armoured vehicle that vibrates forcefully enough to injure anybody inside. $6.5 billion on destroyers whose engines can't power the ship. $2.5 billion on a radio system that turned up 25 years late and is now being replaced by another system that is also delayed and over budget. The National Audit Office puts the whole in the Ministry of Defence's equipment plan at $16.9 billion. This is an MOD that routinely wastes money. It also underspends where it counts. The MOD's own officials have long named cyber attacks as the threat that we neglect, even as research puts the cost to the UK economy at $14.7 billion a year. Prevention is cheap by comparison. The World Economic Forum reports that such spending is, quote, negligible compared to the financial consequences of a cyber attack. Secondly, the left must be clear that the funding shortfall facing the MOD was entirely self-inflicted. The same right-wing politicians now demanding money for war also demanded Brexit, an estimated 4% hit to GDP, and austerity at 2%. They shrank the economy, and they're now demanding further contraction in order to defend what is left. It's a doom loop. The same self-reinforcing vicious cycle can be seen in Britain's international aid spending, which is also being slashed to fund defence. This makes the world more unequal and thus more dangerous. It enables Russia, for example, to lure Kenyans facing a lack of opportunities with the promise of $2,000 a month, and then feed them into what they call meat assaults. If you don't build anything inside your walls, they'll fall down. And if you don't help anyone beyond your walls, you will find that you can never leave them. Defence runs on a population that believes it has something to lose and takes pride in its place in the world, you can't ask it of people whose services you're degrading and whose state you're gutting. Support falls still further when you redefine defence to include wildly unpopular offensive wars. The warmongers have a counter-argument to all of this, that defence spending is good for growth. This is a myth. In World War II, sure, Spitfires were built from British steel by British workers with every pound circulating at home. But an F-35 is not a Spitfire. British firms build only around 15% of each one, and unions reckon that spending the same money on European jets would mean 10 times as many British jobs. Its value chain sits mostly outside of Britain. The same can be said of other nominally British defence exports, like the Raytheon Paveway bombs that we assemble in Scotland. The vision of defence spending as an engine of economic growth, especially in the context of planned cuts to fund it, is an appeal to nostalgia. It's just not a serious economic prospectus. A fiscal multiplier is the return that an economy gets on a pound of government spending. Estimates vary, but a pound spent on defence returns far less than one spent on public investment. The International Monetary Fund puts public investment at around 1.4, around a standard estimate for defence that tops out at 0.7. Military spending is more capital intensive, and more of it leaks out into other countries' economies, so it creates fewer jobs per pound than things like health, education, infrastructure, etc. Move a pound from the first column to the second column and the economy shrinks. More concretely, every 1 million of transport spending supports 11.5 UK jobs. Energy, 10, is similarly fruitful, while defence delivers just 2.4. Cutting infrastructure to pay for defence, as the government plans to do, will cost the UK around 10,000 jobs. None of this is an argument against making our own weapons. It's an argument for actually making them. There's just been a war that showed both the value of producing your own munitions and the risk of depending on Washington to supply them to you. Ukraine now makes about 40% of the weapons it uses at the front and has become the world's biggest drone manufacturer. The UK, meanwhile, is basically just gluing together American components that, in many cases, we need Washington's permission to fire. Speaking of gluing things together, the US is presently passing legislation to bind its own military-industrial complex to Israel's. Britain is also deepening ties with Israel and America. This is not politically sustainable in a world where, polls show, half of Britons believe that Israel is committing a genocide, and more than half see the US as a, quote, negative force in the world. So new thinking is needed. An MOD that wastes billions as a matter of routine should face harder scrutiny, not political reverence that waves the waste through. Stripping welfare, aid, and infrastructure to pay for warfare is self-defeating. You can't have national security without human security. We need to accept that the world is multipolar. Britain is no longer a hegemon, neither is America. We need to fund genuine defence in our own region and not aggression halfway around the world. We also need to build our defence in Britain and with our European neighbours. And we need to stop relying on states that disregard international law. Get that right, and then we can talk about funding. Will Burnham do all of this? Will he do any of it? Will he even try to do any of it? You know the answer as well as I do. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that interesting and insightful. Possibility Space is a listener-supported podcast. You can get it anywhere you get good podcasts. And if you want to become a paid subscriber, you can do that over on Substack. I just wanted to say a particular thank you to my returning listeners. I took a break from the podcast when my second arrived. I struggled a bit with having 2 young kids in the house. So thank you for bearing with me during that period, and hopefully you'll be hearing a lot more from me in the future. Thanks for listening. See you next time.